journalist Kimberly Dozier. Kimberly, good morning to you. Let's start here with the Saudi Foreign Ministry, which warns of these very serious repercussions if there is the storming and targeting of Rafah. What do you expect that means? And we don't often talk about the Saudis militarily. Is that the context? Is it unilaterally? What do you expect that they have behind that warning?
I think this is a diplomatic warning that the olive branch that they've held out to Israel, that they would consider normalizing relations if Israel even indicates a willingness to start planning for a separate Palestinian state, that then they could have diplomatic relations with Riyadh. That would be off the table. But with other nations like the UAE, that's part of the Abraham Accords that were signed by the Trump administration and continued by the Biden administration. The UAE has also threatened some sort of fallout if this Rafah operation goes forward. That could mean threatening the Abraham Accords, possibly pulling out of it. So the Israeli Prime Minister's office has said they're planning for, or they've ordered the army to plan for some sort of evacuation. Unfortunately, we've seen how evacuation plans have gone in the past without trust between the Israeli military and the various NGO and UN bodies to plan for where these people would move, and also without trust between the Palestinians who will be getting orders from the Israelis as to where they should move. It's not going to work out well. We've seen how it worked when the Israeli military had that detailed plan where it broke Gaza into dozens of different sectors and then messaged Gazans where to move to when it moved south. They weren't able to move fast, and sometimes Hamas prevented them from moving, and sometimes there was just nowhere to go.
Yeah, and we heard from the Prime Minister there that they are doing for Rafah what they've done up to now, and we've seen how that's resulted. They want to do this within 4 weeks before Ramadan. It's 28 days to relocate more than potentially 1 million people out of that area. So the U.S. says that it will not support this ground operation in Rafah without the serious planning, I assume more than what they've done up to this point. What does opposition to it look like? Is that a speech? I mean, I don't know that the U.S. is going to pull back any financial or military support based on what's coming through Congress. What's the opposition to it look like?
Well, the Biden administration has done a full court press in terms of rhetorical warnings last week to Israel that it has stepped too far. From Biden saying from the podium that Israel's response in Gaza has been over the top, to John Kirby saying that the NSC spokesman saying that if they hit Rafah, it would be a disaster, to Blinken, the Secretary of State, visiting Israel and saying from the podium there that Israelis have essentially dehumanized the Gazans and that the dehumanization of October 7th doesn't give them an excuse to do that. All of that is the public threat. Behind it, though, is a White House memo that was quietly released last week that didn't name Israel specifically, but said that any country receiving U.S. military aid, which Israel really needs right now to continue its prosecution of this operation, has to sign an annual pledge of sorts saying that it is cleaving to international law. So that is one way of saying if this continues, the U.S. might turn off the tap or lessen this ammunition flow to the Israeli military.
And you think that's realistic considering the political concerns in an election year, that the U.S. would reduce its military cachet that they would offer Israel?
Possibly it wouldn't get that far, but it is a warning that, look, the Biden administration is facing an election and the left side of its base is furious over the prosecution of the war in Gaza. So they need Netanyahu's government to make some good faith effort to show that they are trying to look after the health of the Palestinian people, if only so that the Biden administration can be seen publicly to be speaking on their behalf.
Let's talk now about these remarks from the former President Donald Trump. This is him in Conway, South Carolina, an ultimatum of sorts for NATO allies.
no, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
Now, that's what he says will happen if NATO countries don't pay up. Now, he's long put it in this framework of NATO countries paying. What he's talking about is a non-binding target of countries paying 2% at least of their GDP toward their defense. There's a short list of countries that do that now, but we've heard from the White House on this. It's music to Putin's ears. What do you think is the reaction to from those allies? It really can't be a surprise, though, I wouldn't imagine.
It is leading every European and British newscast, and European officials had already been disaster planning for a potential Trump administration second term. That's what officials had told me. And they are worried, simply put, bracing for impact.
Kimberly Dozier, good to have you this Sunday morning.
Still to come, a 15-year